Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever and wherever you're listening. Welcome to Way Outta Here, the Philly sports podcast with fan perspective from way outside the greater Philadelphia area. My name is Steve Prudente, here with you as always to take you on the journey for the next half hour or so, enjoying sitting in the podcast chair inside on this cold, early December day. It's not quite winter yet, according to the calendar, but it is snowing outside, accumulating here. The kids are off from school. I, however, am getting to work, and will have a topic for you today. Before I get into it, though, I'd like to remind you to subscribe to me on the social media platform of your choice on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. Search for Way Outta Here Podcast. On Blue Sky, Way Outta Here Pod. On the blog, WayOuttaHerePodcast.blogspot.com. And if you've got any feedback, you can always send me an email to WayOuttaHerePodcast@gmail.com. Available just about wherever you get your podcasts on Apple and Spotify. I'd appreciate that rating. On Apple, a review would be even better. Thank you so much in advance. I will begin, as I always do, with the beer of the show. Today's selection is Dead and Dead by Rogue Ales in Newport, Oregon, and I will have more on that at the end of the show. Today's topic is born out of several experiences I've had recently living in the city of Pittsburgh as a hockey fan. Those of you may know that the Flyers and Penguins are pretty big rivals on the ice, and I've had a couple experiences recently that kind of interesting and got my creative juices flowing in my head, so I'm going to get into the topic of today's episode. Scott Hartnell, still the most hated athlete in Pittsburgh, even though he's been retired since 2018. So last night, I was watching the Flyers versus the Penguins game at a local bar with some friends who, of course, are Penguins fans. They've lived here most of their lives and support their local hockey team. A few weeks ago, I was talking hockey with another friend who has lived out here most of her life as well. And both discussions and both experiences, one name continued to come up without being prompted, and it was Scott Hartnell, which, as you probably guessed from the topic of the episode, yes, his name came up both times in conversation for the same reason, because he's not well liked, was not well liked when he was a player actively with the Flyers, and apparently still disliked to this day. He was one of the key players from my favorite era of Flyers hockey to date, from 2007 through, 2008, I guess, through about 2013 or so. And I wanted to get into a little bit of this, why Penguins fans don't like him, why I do like him, why he was so endeared by one fan base and so absolutely despised by another one. So let's start with Pittsburgh angle. Why they hate him? Well, it apparently stems from an incident in 2009 where Scott Hartnell allegedly bit Penguins defenseman, future Hall of Famer Chris Letang. This was in 2009. I could not find video evidence of it. Apparently, it's never actually been verified. A lot of hearsay. When there are scrums during a hockey game, a lot of things do happen. I'm not saying that it didn't happen. I'm just saying I don't have proof beyond a reasonable doubt that it did happen. So that's apparently where this really, really started. This is about the time that the Penguins and Flyers rivalry was getting into its peak, if not already at its peak. Scott Hartnell also, during a 2012 playoff game, well known that he mocked a Penguins superfan. I will try to look up his name, put it in the show notes, because there was an addendum to this at the end. But he apparently mocked this Hulk Hogan superfan that used to sit behind the Pens bench. It was during the 2012 playoff series that was absolutely bonkers. Lots of goals scored in that series, lots of brawls, lots of fights, a little bit of everything in that series. It was not normal playoff hockey if you think of there is such a thing as normal playoff hockey. The brawl that happened in Game 3 in Philadelphia, I was actually in attendance for that game, and this incident with Hulk Hogan that I believe had happened in Game 2 prompted Hulk Hogan to actually create a hype video that they played in the arena before the game, and the orange t-shirts that they gave to every fan before they came into the arena to create that orange wave that you've probably seen in photos and on TV. The design of that shirt had Scott Hartnell on the front of it, making the Hulk Hogan "what you gonna do, brother" motion with his hand to his ear. So it was quite an exorbitant incident that from both sides that got both sides of the rivalry charged up at that particular time. I got one of those t-shirts. I still have it. It's somewhere in my archives in my office. Archives, if you want to have a t-shirt archive, I guess. But yeah, I held on to that one. Some of those designs were really funny, and that's a good reminder of what things were like in that rivalry at that time. Anyway, so this kind of segues nicely into why I love him. Well, because he was this larger-than-life personality. In addition to being a pretty good player on the ice, he wasn't a superstar. He's not going to score you 60 goals. He's not the guy that's going to light up the score sheet like a Sidney Crosby or an Evgeny Malkin or Alex Ovechkin. Not that kind of superstar, but he's one of those mid-tier guys that you need in your middle six forwards that's going to score you an average maybe 20 to 30 goals a year, plays with an edge, doesn't take shit from anybody, defends the guys on the ice that need to be defended, who might actually be the superstars. So he played with an edge. He did score a whole bunch of goals. He reminds me of a player in today's current NHL that I dislike, and Penguins fans probably do too, Tom Wilson of the Washington Capitals. You dislike him because he plays with a little bit of a dirty streak. Scott Hartnell was no stranger to suspensions. He did get a few throughout his career. Tom Wilson has certainly been suspended for definitely dirty hits, but he does score goals. That's part of the reason that people didn't like him as well, was in addition to doing those things that were questionable, I'll say. He was pretty good. He was a solid player, too. People don't generally hate athletes that aren't actually good, although there are a few I will list later on in this episode that I did hate just because they were actual pieces of shit on the ice. So that part of the reasons why I loved him, that era of Flyers hockey from 2008 through, let's say 2012, maybe 2013, was pretty fun. The Flyers had come back after their worst season in franchise history in 2006-07, and got Danny Briere, Scott Hartnell, Claude Giroux was coming up, nice young star there. They brought in Marty Biron, who was a decent enough goaltender to solidify that position. Kimmo Timonen, mentioned Scott Hartnell already. A lot of those guys were part of building a different nucleus of a team that eventually ended up getting Chris Pronger and taking them all the way to the Stanley Cup final in 2010, and was a consistent run of successive playoff teams that were fun to watch, always competitive. This was the Paul Holmgren era of just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks, do anything at any cost to stay competitive because Ed Snyder was still around, and that was his MO as an owner. So it was a great time and a fun time to be a Flyers fan when Scott Hartnell was in his prime. I also liked that in addition to being this kind of a larger-than-life personality, when he screwed up, he was a pretty good sport about it. Some of you may remember the hashtag that was trending on Twitter during that era, Hartnell down. It was because he had a propensity for falling down on the ice. When he was trying to make plays, on occasion he would actually score a goal while doing this sort of thing, so the Hartnell down hashtag was a big part of him being a good sport. He actually signed a Penguins fans jersey. They made a custom jersey that said Fart Smell as the last name on the back of the jersey. Okay, I'll give you points for being clever there. And apparently he signed it to his biggest fan. So never one to shy away from poking a little fun at himself, having a good time. I mean, I think I loved him because he understood as a player that this is an entertainment business. Yes, you want your team to win, but more than anything, you want it to be fun and enjoyable, and personalities like his are part of that. One of those guys that you absolutely despise when he's not on your team, but if he is on your team, you totally love him. I don't know how you couldn't. And one of my favorite such incidents was in, it was 2008, the fall of 2008. The Flyers were playing the Tampa Bay Lightning. Hartnell gets beat on a breakaway and decides to toss his glove at the Lightning forward to try to break up a scoring attempt, a one-on-one. Obviously didn't work, and even if it did, it was an illegal play. So they give the Lightning a penalty shot, I should say, not a playoff shot. Jesus, they give the Lightning a penalty shot as the rule book states. Luckily, the Lightning didn't end up scoring on that penalty shot, but still was a funny incident that came courtesy of Scott Hartnell's antics on the ice. A couple of nights later, this was at the time I was a partial season ticket holder to the Philadelphia Phantoms, who were in their final season at the Spectrum. Hartnell held a glove toss night. It was right around Christmas time, so the weather's getting colder, and used it as an opportunity to solicit donations for gloves and winter garb for needy families throughout the greater Philadelphia area. During one of the intermissions, everybody would, done teddy bear tosses and other things like that. This was for gloves and winter clothes. As I said, you would toss them on the ice during the intermission. They would collect them, give them out to needy families. And before the game, Hartnell took the opportunity to sign some autographs. So I got a picture of myself with him, and I do have those autographs in my office somewhere. And that's a night that always stuck with me. It's like, hey, he screwed up on the ice, poked a little fun at himself, and then used it to turn around and be a charitable person. I also wanted to mention that incident with the fan. I will try to look up his name again. I think it was Cy something. That fan did pass away a couple of years later. I recall Broad Street Hockey brought that to our attention, and Scott Hartnell had posted on his Facebook page at the time saying condolences to the family and to the Pittsburgh fan base, who he was a dedicated fan, and that he acknowledged essentially that fans like that and personalities like Scott Hartnell's are the reason that sports are fun. It is, some people do take things a little bit too seriously at times, but it is supposed to be all about the fans engaging with these personalities and enjoying it because, as I said before, it's an entertainment business. So Scott Hartnell passed on condolences to him after he passed away. Certainly an incident and a time in both of the fan bases that was pretty memorable, and wanted to mention that too because in addition to being a good sport like that and playing on the edge and doing all of the things that he did that made him a memorable player, I get the impression that he's generally just a good person, as you can probably see if you're a Flyers fan and you're living in the greater Philadelphia area, you get to see him on the pre and post game and intermission shows. Just generally a pleasant personality to be around. One of those locker room guys that you love to have. So getting back on track here, I would like to remind everybody that Scott Hartnell was traded away from Philadelphia after the 2013-14 season. He was traded to the Columbus Blue Jackets in exchange for a draft pick, and R.J. Umberger, former Flyer who came back to the Flyers. He was a bit of a cult hero during the 2007-2008 playoff run, but this was one of those moves that really kind of started to turn the team into a different direction. R.J. Umberger was not the player that he was during those playoffs ever again in his career with Columbus and then also with Philadelphia. And it really took a lot of chemistry out of the Flyers locker room as they started to engage in what I guess you could say is a rebuild. They did sneak into the playoffs that year and they went to 7 games versus the Rangers, but didn't get any further. Not that I think they were really in contention, but at any rate, the point being that Hartnell was traded away. Now he hasn't played in Philadelphia in over 11 years. And the Penguins have won 2 Stanley Cups since then, but the memory apparently remains, and all of those sour tastes in their mouth that Penguins fans don't like about it still remains because Hartnell's, as I said, been retired since after the 2018 season. Penguins have won cups since then. They're still, despite having missed the playoffs the last 3 seasons, a team that's had a lot more success than Hartnell ever did in his career. Because, let's face it, I love the guy. He never won a Stanley Cup and didn't help the team get to that ultimate goal. There were other reasons for that we don't need to get into here, but all this to say that for Penguins fans to still continue to hold such a grudge is just illuminating, is all I want to say. We Philadelphia fans certainly hold grudges for quite a long time as well. I'm not saying that we're without fault there. Just something interesting that I wanted to point out there. I'd like to finish off this section, the topic section, by pointing out there are a whole bunch of former Penguins who I think were actually way worse than Scott Hartnell, mostly on the ice and a couple of them off the ice. Darius Kasparaitis, a pretty odious human being right there. Awful, dirty player. Hated him when he played for the Penguins in the early 2000s and late 1990s. Ulf Samuelsson also played for the Rangers. He was absolute menace. Brutal checks. Definitely some of them were pretty dirty. Back in the clutch and grab era, too, when you could get away with a little bit more stuff and the game was not nearly quite as fast-paced. He's a big bruising guy that, I mean, if I ever played hockey, would have hated to play against. I also hated watching him. Matt Cook, a guy who later on in his career tried to rehabilitate his reputation for dirty hits. Unfortunately, I don't think he really could have done enough because he had a whole lot of dirty plays that were questionable. He got suspended. I believe he also had a skate incident where he lifted his skate up and tore an Achilles tendon off of Erik Karlsson, who was then with the Ottawa Senators. Now he's actually playing for the Penguins. Interesting how that came full circle. And last but certainly not least, or maybe certainly least, Matt Barnaby. Awful player. Apparently an awful guy off the ice, too, because I read several times he was convicted of DUI charges. He was an absolute menace on the ice for the Penguins and the Buffalo Sabres, and I believe the Columbus Blue Jackets as well. So all teams that were Eastern Conference rivals of the Philadelphia Flyers in the 90s and early 2000s. Saw a lot of Matt Barnaby, way more than I really wanted to, and I'm really thankful that he was never on my team, because I don't think I would have liked him even if he was. My favorite example of such a player is Dan Carcillo, who a lot of Flyers fans really loved because of the way he played. I thought he was a nuisance. He took a lot of dumb penalties. That's what Matt Barnaby did. And I just wasn't, I don't really have room for that on my team. Dumb penalties, playing with an edge. I mean, I still will never forgive Dan Carcillo for what he did in the 2009 playoffs, getting into a fight with Max Talbot when you're up 3-0. Just a senseless thing that didn't need to happen. But I've gone off track. I digress. So the rivalry, as it stands today between the Flyers and Penguins, it's not what it was during Scott Hartnell's heyday when Crosby was still in his early years. I mean, his prime is I guess you could say over, but he's still among the league leaders in goals. I don't think that his best days are in front of him, but he's still a very, very talented, good player who will definitely play into his early 40s and be a force on the ice. But the rivalry's just not what it once was back then. But players like Scott Hartnell are the type of people that make it happen, and for that, I will always be thankful. Present day, the Flyers, as I mentioned, were playing the Penguins last night. They got absolutely shellacked, 5-1. Don't really need to dig into the results of that game too much. It's a regular season game. During the course of the season, you're going to have some stinkers. Last night was certainly one of those, but they currently sit at 14-8-3 in a wild card spot. It's very early in the season, but never hurts to keep at least one eye on the standings, because you can't make the playoffs in November and December, but you can certainly miss them by losing a lot of games at that time of year. So looking at the current state of the team, I'm still seeing more good than bad. They won 6 of their last 9 games despite last night's beatdown. Last week, the day I recorded, a few hours later, the Flyers scored 3 goals in 27 seconds in a 6-3 win versus the New Jersey Devils. They did put a stinker up versus the Tampa Bay Lightning a couple days later, but then had a thrilling comeback versus the Florida Panthers 4-2, a 4-3 shootout win versus the New York Islanders, and then another win versus the New Jersey Devils 5-3, this time on the road against a team that has been very good in their home building, that is New Jersey. So good play from the team. I mean, I still don't think that it's sustainable to be falling behind and having to come back as much as they have been. But overall, I do like what I'm seeing as opposed to what I've been seeing over the last few years. Defense is relatively strong. Goaltending has been above par most of the year. Dan Vladar has been absolutely fantastic, save for last night. Defensive breakdowns notwithstanding. And I also wanted to tie this into the time of year. Last week was Thanksgiving. I wanted to, as I go through the Philly sports teams here, I'm going to finish off each topic with what I'm thankful for with regards to the team. It could be something from the present or just the overall scheme of things. As I mentioned, Dan Vladar, but I'm also very happy and thankful for Trevor Zegras, who has revitalized his career. There's no other way to put it. Since coming to Philadelphia via trade in the offseason, looking forward to hopefully getting him an extension this year and seeing him in a Flyers jersey for several years to come. I'm thankful for Coach Rick Tocchet, who really all he had to do was be a different, better voice in the room, but he's doing it effectively and getting this team to play well. And also General Manager Danny Briere and the front office, Keith Jones, and so on and so forth, because they have pushed this team in a good direction. This rebuild, I know we've been through several Flyers rebuilds in the last 10 years, but this one just does feel different, and the team is heading in a strong direction, and I'm thankful for that. It's been a long time coming, guys. Moving along, I will, as I said, at the end of each topic, give you things that I am thankful for. Not currently very thankful for the state of the Philadelphia Eagles, as they sit at 8-4. Last time I checked in with you, they were 8-2, which is crazy because it's amazing what a difference, 8 days can make, or even 5 days, because between Sunday and Friday, they lost 2 games. First, of course, they were up 21-0 the first half versus the Dallas Cowboys, then absolutely collapsed. A lot of people were saying that they got conservative. I actually didn't see it that way. I think they just got predictable. If they were conservative, they would have ran the ball a little bit more. They were throwing the ball seemingly every down. There was a 3rd and 2 late in the third quarter, I remember, against them, and they decided to throw the ball. The result was an incomplete pass, stopped the clock, Cowboys got the ball, went down and got more points. I mean, the Dallas Cowboys made their fair share of mistakes, and I don't think that the Cowboys are any threat to actually win the Super Bowl this year. Based on what I've seen in the 2 games versus Philadelphia, that's about all the Dallas Cowboys I can handle watching in a given season. But they make so many mistakes. CeeDee Lamb dropped a whole bunch of passes that were right in his breadbasket. Dak Prescott is a bit of a gunslinger, and so he will make mistakes in that vein of how he likes to play. And also, the Eagles were given an absolute gift that Brandon Aubrey, who's the most automatic kicker maybe in all of NFL history, missed a field goal. But the Eagles missed one of their own and shot themselves in the foot a whole bunch of times. My point being that I don't think that Dallas is going to win the Super Bowl, but when they make these many mistakes, you have to capitalize on them. The Eagles, for the most part this season, have been a team that does capitalize on them. They win the turnover battle. Oddly enough, they did win the turnover battle that day, but still lost. Didn't capitalize on the mistakes enough. And then you flash forward to the end of the week, Black Friday. I'm against the Black Friday football game. I thought it was really stupid of Amazon to do this. And actually, truth be told, I missed the first part of the game because for whatever reason, I guess I was assuming it would be a night game. It doesn't really make much sense to put a football game on 3 o'clock on Black Friday. Regardless of whether or not you're going shopping, 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. I had the day off. The last thing on my mind was, I'm going to sit down and watch the Eagles at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So I didn't realize until I got the alert on my phone and it said kickoff is underway. Oh, shoot. All right, I guess we'll flip over to the Eagles game. We were in the midst of decorating for Christmas, and I was a little bit divided attention-wise at the start of the game. What I ended up seeing was they got absolutely embarrassed by the Bears. A.J. Brown had a couple of touchdowns. That was cool, but one of them was an underthrown ball that A.J. had to wrestle away from a defender. Not a great throw by Jalen Hurts. Didn't love to see that. He, of course, fumbled on a tush push. Don't love to see that either. Making a lot of mistakes. And again, the play calling was just so predictable. Throwing the ball way more than running the ball. I hate to beat that drum. I don't like to be the guy that yells and says, run the freaking ball. But it reminds me so much of the years at the end of the Andy Reid era when you had, the offensive line is, yes, a little bit banged up, kind of a little bit patchwork here, but they're still one of the strengths of the team, in my opinion. And regardless of whether or not the run is working consistently every single play, you cannot win a football game in this day and age by completely abandoning the run. But they did that 2 games in a row now. And the easiest possible solution is, I know there's a lot of people out there saying it, and I don't like to seriously advocate for firing of coaches, but you got to do something. And so the easiest possible solution is to make a change at play caller. Fire Kevin Patullo, the offensive coordinator. I don't know if the alternative is any better, but even if it doesn't work, I don't see any way that you can sit here and just sit on your hands and sit still and say, okay, we can fix this the way things are. No, that hasn't been working. It is week 13. They're 8-4. We are most of the way through the season, and we were staring down a division title if they had won versus the Cowboys to now having a look in the mirror just a little bit. I said that a win would have all but clinched the division. The Cowboys would need to win out, and the Eagles would have needed to just get to 11 wins, I think it was at the time. Now they're going to have to get at least 12 because Dallas has won 2 straight. They won on Thanksgiving versus the Kansas City Chiefs, and they're only a couple of games behind the Philadelphia Eagles, believe it or not. And that tie that they had versus the Green Bay Packers early in the season could come into play. So you got to do something. The talent is on this team to win. I don't know if there's something we're not knowing about with regard to A.J. Brown, although he did have a strong game on Friday, I should say. Jalen Hurts maybe is hurt. Maybe Saquon's banged up. I don't really know. Whatever the case may be, you have to make a change to this offense in some way, shape, or form because it's just not working. I did want to mention, though, what you should not do as a fan is you should not go out and egg Kevin Patullo's house. I saw a report about that. I do not love that. That gives us fans a bad name. Guys, ultimately, this is an entertainment product. As I said earlier in the podcast, we don't need to be taking things so seriously that we're trying to cause physical harm or damage to a person's property just because our football team isn't winning. Anyway, what am I thankful for with this team? Well, I'm thankful for the 2017 and 2024 seasons where they finished off by winning a Super Bowl both times. Need I remind you that the last two teams the Eagles have faced and lost to in the regular season have not won Super Bowls since 1995 and 1985 seasons, respectively. And the Bears, to their credit, at least have made a Super Bowl in this century after the 2006 season. So be thankful for that we had those. And despite how things are going currently, make some changes to the coaching staff. This team is still in a better place than a lot of other teams in the league. So I will hang my hat on that. And move on to one more disappointment. The Philadelphia Union last Saturday, after I had recorded, lost a heartbreaker to New York City. I'm sorry, it was on Sunday. They lost a heartbreaker just hours after the Eagles had been embarrassed by the Cowboys. Lost a heartbreaker to NYC FC 1-0, eliminating them from the MLS Cup playoffs. Their former backup goalkeeper, Matt Freese, had the game of his life as the Union continued to try to pepper him with shots in the second half. A couple of them were very, very good chances. I believe they rang one off the post, too, if memory serves correctly. Andre Blake, Union goalkeeper, all-world goalkeeper, did go out injured in the second half, but that didn't really cost the Union that much. They had already given up a goal due to some piss poor defense earlier in the game in the first half. You know, I'm not blaming the playoff format for the loss. I still just don't like this playoff format. It felt like the Union were off for about a month, and it was very close to it between their first round matchup and their second round matchup. Thankfully, that is going to change, not next season, but the year after that, and I will look forward to that. So I'll keep this short. What I'm thankful for with the Union, they got a supporter shield this year in a year that everyone was really expecting them to be down in the dumps because of what had happened the previous couple of seasons. I'm thankful for that. The team did well this year, do have some young talent, Ty Baribo, among others, that should help to keep this team moving forward in a good direction. I'm hopeful that the front office starts to maybe change the way that they do business and spend some money on some established talent, because we can't keep doing what has been happening over the last 5, 6, 7 years and expect to continue to win. I will also be keeping an eye on the Ernst Tanner situation. I don't like to comment too much on legal matters, but there's a lawsuit, reopened case involving him and some sexual assault allegations, so I will be keeping an eye on that situation as well, and I encourage you to also look into it and make judgments for yourself. Don't love to see those sorts of things, but I said I will refrain from actual commentary on it until I know a little bit more about it. The Sixers are currently sitting at 10-9, going through a little bit of a rough stretch. They are 4-6 in their last 10. They were eliminated from the NBA Cup in that stretch versus the Orlando Magic. I didn't love the coaching decisions at the end of that game. The game was clearly out of reach. Magic were pulling away, and late in the fourth quarter, Tyrese Maxey, Nick Nurse still had him out there, risking injury in a game that was, I believe they lost by 30-some points. You're never going to come back and win that game. It reminded me a lot of, there was a game Andy Reid had Brian Westbrook in towards the end of the game back in like 2007 or 2008. And they asked Andy about it after the game. The game was down by like 3 scores with like 3 minutes to go. Clearly not a great chance to come back and win that game, especially with your, oddly enough, running the football, which not a big staple of the Andy Reid offense in those years. Andy Reid said after that game, we were trying to come back and win the game. BS. And Nick Nurse kind of said something similar too. Well, you want to put the best lineup out there. Give yourself the chance to win. What are you trying to do? Pad points here? You're worried about point differential in the NBA Cup when you haven't won a game yet in the group play? There was no reason to have him in that game. Thankfully, he made it out unscathed, and that does tie in nicely to what I am thankful for with this team. Tyrese Maxey is still lighting up the score sheet, and he is among the one of the best guards in the league. And thankful for him, but also our new young talented rookie, VJ Edgecombe. You know, back before the draft, lottery, we thought the Sixers lost the pick initially because of some questionable announcing from the broadcast team. Then it ended up they won. They didn't get all the way up to the first pick, but they moved up to the third pick. So they win the lottery, get VJ Edgecombe, who basically was it really depended how the draft board went in picks 1 and 2, but I think we can all kind of agree that he's been a better fit than Cooper Flagg or Dylan Harper would have been, who went 1 and 2 respectively. And the future is looking bright for this kid, with Tyrese Maxey being the focal point of the offense and having solid defense from both of those guys to push the play and really dramatically change the landscape of this team in just one offseason. I mean, it's absolutely crazy to me to see how much promise that kind of a difference can bring in. Joel Embiid and Paul George still kind of being what they are at this point in their careers, and looking forward to seeing what he can do the rest of this season and beyond. Finally, the Philadelphia Phillies, not really much to say. We're in the offseason. There is some reported interest in infielder Ketel Marte from the Arizona Diamondbacks, which would probably cause some sort of a shift around the infield. There's just a lot of cold stove bullshit going on. They call it the hot stove. I don't know why, but the Major League Baseball offseason, as I've said before, and I'll say again, is kind of annoying to me. And I'm kind of tuning out right now until I hear something more concrete, especially regarding Kyle Schwarber, which I think still is the main domino that has to fall before anything else falls into place. What I'm thankful for there, of course, 2008 winning the World Series, 2022 was a magical run, but current state, I'm thankful for the starting rotation. We have Zach Wheeler, who should be coming back healthy in 2026, and Christopher Sanchez, who got votes for the Cy Young this year and should be a great force going forward. I think Aaron Nola will have a rebound year in next year. He had a really down year this year. He was injured for part of it. We're going to have Andrew Painter coming up probably some point next year. And overall, we just have a very solid foundation of pitching on this team, which will give you a chance no matter what the offense looks like. Now, of course, could use some improvement, but I'm thankful that we have that anchor to provide us some stability and build the team from there outward. Guess I'll keep my eyes peeled, keep my ears listening to see if anything comes up, but for now I'm kind of just tuned out on the Phillies, to be totally honest with you. Well, that's going to wrap up this episode of Way Outta Here. I will finish, as I always do, by outroing the beer I introduced at the top of the show. A little bit of a sad beer for today's show. Last week, it was announced that Rogue Ales in Newport, Oregon will be closing its doors unless something changes. Apparently, they were behind in rent and taxes. We saw this happen here in Pittsburgh with Necromancer Brewing, and it's an unfortunate reality that breweries face. I know operating expenses are not cheap. It's tough to manage a brewery. That said, it's really surprising because Rogue's been around since 1988, I think. So for them to end up in this kind of a situation was really surprising to hear. And I love their beer. They were one of the first craft breweries I got into when I first started getting into really good beer about 15, 20 years ago. But I chose a beer for them today because you can still find some of it on the shelves depending on where you go. There might be some of the barrel-aged stuff that is out there for a little bit longer, and that is what I'm going to feature today. I chose the Dead and Dead, which is a seasonal release. It comes out every year. It's listed as a Helles Bock, a Maibock, or a Lentabock. I don't know that I know exactly what that style is, but it is a thick 9.5% ABV Bock by Rogue Ales. The original Dead Guy Ale, which this is based off of, is also a Maibock. The description on Untapped reads, "Our brewers and distillers teamed up to show off the best of both worlds by aging Dead Guy Ale in Dead Guy whiskey barrels. Dead and Dead complements the flavor profile of our classic Dead Guy Ale with the oak, vanilla, and fruit notes from the whiskey barrels." So I do like to try not to have repeat breweries or beers on this show. This is not a repeat beer, but I did feature the Rogue Dead Guy on an episode back in 2023 when the Philadelphia 76ers were eliminated from the playoffs, embarrassingly, by the Boston Celtics. Thought that was an appropriate beer for that occasion, and so I will repeat Rogue beer because we're not going to have really any opportunity to have them on the show again. This was a very solid beer. As I said, 9.5% ABV, so a pretty beefy boy, but great for this time of year where it's getting colder outside, where it is already cold, and we're getting some snow on the ground. Maybe enjoy this with a cigar if you can stomach the outside for that length of time. And find it while you can. If you're living in the Lehigh Valley area, Shangy's will probably have it, maybe one of your other bigger beer emporiums. Look out for it. It's a fantastic beer, and get it while you can. Nothing gold can stay. That will do it for this episode of Way Outta Here. I appreciate you stopping by. If you don't already, you can follow me on the social media platform of your choice on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Way Outta Here Podcast, on Blue Sky, Way Outta Here Pod, on the blog, WayOuttaHerePodcast.blogspot.com. And if you have any feedback, you can always send an email to WayOuttaHerePodcast@gmail.com. Available wherever you get your podcast. On Apple and Spotify, a rating would be awesome. On Apple, a review would be even better. Thank you so much in advance. Until next time, be safe in whatever it is that you do.